think it's just not enough to have a good product anymore, Cam. I just don't. You can build whole worlds from a text prompt that you can actually kind of go and walk around. AI can't hold the brush, but it can help inspire the strokes.
Welcome to Prompted, a podcast about AI, people, and the creative spark. I'm Cameron Adams, co-founder and chief product officer at Canva, and I am fascinated with leaders who are using AI to supercharge their creative spark. Today, I'm here with Natalie Piucco, the field CTO at Google Cloud. Natalie is a tech executive and self-taught engineer who is helping businesses leverage emerging technology like AI to fuel explosive growth. For over a decade, Natalie has had an all-access pass to the inner workings of companies of all sizes. She's also applied her technical expertise and commercialization skills to launch 6 of Google's new businesses to global markets. From putting AI in Google Photos to launching Google's first hardware business and building Google's executive AI education training business. With a resume like that, Natalie, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Cam. I'm really excited for the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one. Let's kick off with the prompt. This is the part of the show where you draw something from your childhood that inspired you while you tell us the story all in 90 seconds.
I'm ready to take on the challenge, Cam.
Okay, bring up the timer and let's go.
In my childhood, I spent a lot of summer holidays going up and working on my family's banana farm in Coffs Harbour, me and my 2 sisters. My parents would pack up the 4-wheel drive and drive us up the road a couple of hours. And there would be this big banana shed in this open field. And growing up, it was so much fun because it was kind of like a Willy Wonka factory. But instead of all the chocolate, it was, these big banana chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, like going around the ceiling on these big kind of dollies. So it was so fun working on this farm. It was magical. But my family were Italian. So every lunchtime we'd stop and everyone would have pasta for lunch and kind of homemade salamis, which was actually, we'd all gather around this big table, which is quite funny watching Italians eat pasta on a banana farm. So that was really fun. And my great-grandmother, she brought in this technology to build these banana farm boxes. They never kind of had that before. It was all handmade. And then we would get these templates. We'd had our family name on it and like where the bananas were going, and we'd spray them on the side of the boxes. So she kind of made these templates, these Canva templates before Canva kind of even existed, which was pretty fun.
We need Canva for banana boxes.
Yes, we do. That was really ahead of the time, that piece of technology. I was obsessed with it. Yeah, that was how I spent most of my family holidays.
I'm amazed to see what this sketch looks like. I've never heard of someone who lived in Willy Wonka but for bananas. So yeah. This is going to be great.
Oh my goodness. Okay, don't laugh. I'm not the world's best drawer, but here's the shed. This is my family having the spaghetti on the banana farm, all the banana chandeliers and the boxes we would make.
That is amazing. That is perfect. That is exactly what we need. We're sending this picture to Harriet, our designer in residence, who's going to team up with AI to whip it into something new. So stay tuned for that. While Harriet works, let's chat to you, Natalie, about creativity and AI. So you have an incredible background. You're a self-taught engineer. You learned from Vint Cerf, an American internet pioneer who is recognized as one of the fathers of the internet. And you now help navigate huge companies through the AI disruption we're all living in. So what's your approach for helping leaders and organizations to foster rapid learning and engage with new technology?
Yeah, I think the truth is, Cam, everything we know about business and technology is it's being rewritten. And a lot of businesses are faced with this question. How do we possibly keep up when the stakes keep getting higher? And there is no book you can give to leaders to navigate this pace of change. The rules just keep being rewritten. So if you're leading a business through change, I think at minimum, you really have to upgrade your organization's learning OS or learning operating systems. So I think some of the businesses that I see and work with at minimum, they give everybody baseline AI literacy training. and then a platform to actually experiment with the tools. But some of the less obvious ways, I think, to foster rapid learning is for leaders to create space for their teams to start without having all the answers. I think that's the key. And I've learnt that from building products and teams in my career. Progress comes from beginning, not from certainty. You can't wait. I think that's what a lot of businesses think right now. They need to wait or to feel ready to use AI or to use emerging technology. But readiness, it isn't a feeling, it's a decision to be ready.
Do you do that for every team across the company, or do you just say one special team is getting to do that?
I think that's how we used to think. I think we used to start off and say, okay, we're only going to educate the engineers around a new piece of technology. But I think now in the AI age, that's a mistake, and you're really missing out on getting the people, which are typically the non-technical folks, the people in the business who are actually closest to the customer or closest to the problem spaces, to upskill them on AI, but also teach them how to spot the opportunities. So that's what I would say. It's not just the technical folks anymore. You must be upskilling your non-technical business leads in your organizations.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sorry, you were saying about other things that leaders in organizations need to tackle.
So Google did some research around what were the characteristics of some of our high-performing teams across the business. And can you guess the number one trait that came back for the highest performing teams?
Love of bananas.
Love, so close. You were so close. It was psychological safety. So of all the things that stack ranked of teams that were the most creative and successful, they had psychological safety. And how does this link back to learning? It means that if you have a group of people in a team that feels safe to admit that they don't know, they are more likely to be able to learn together. And this I think also extends to not just the people that you have in the team now, but the people that you're going to hire and bring into the team as well. So hiring for adaptability, because titles aren't going to stick around, Cam. They're just not, but I think hunger and this learning mindset and the ability to, be comfortable in expressing your creative thoughts, that is the key to learning and keeping pace.
Psychological safety and trust is actually one of the things I talk about to every Canvanaut who joins Canva in their onboarding sessions. It's something that we've taken to heart directly from Google. Do you think there's something extra we need to do in today's AI age?
The only other thing that I would add there is AI is fundamentally a creative technology. And I know one thing that we do at Google is in the onboarding stage, if you become I know you say Canvanaut, we say Googlers, everybody gets design thinking training. That it's the kind of double diamond process where you kind of focus on the user, you think really big, and then you make the ideas really small again, and then you actually go and test really fast, and the loop begins. I think that's actually really critical, and it doesn't cost anything, right? I think that's the trap too. You don't have to spend a heap of money if you have a small team. I think giving people a shared language around design thinking and putting humans at the center of the design problem is really critical if you want to build and with AI and build really quickly.
Equipping people with design thinking skills is really critical now that we're thinking about AI, because it's that curiosity, that ability to generate new ideas and to figure out which ideas are the best ones.
Absolutely.
Which is ultimately going to help us succeed when we have an infinite pool of possibilities from what AI is giving to us. One of the things that we've really pressed on is that there is a lot of fear and uncertainty right now about what's my job going to look like in 10 years. And I think being really transparent about that as a leader in an organization is really important. And we've done that with all of our Canva teams and encourage them to think about what their job is going to be in 5 or 10 years and invent that themselves, dive into the technology, play around with it, do some things that don't work, do some things that work amazingly well, and really help shape their future and the future of the organization itself.
Yeah, spot on. It's like helping Canvanauts and just employees and businesses, I say prepare for a menu of possible futures.
A menu of possible futures. Immediately makes me think of multiverses and expanding realities. It's amazing. I think at the heart of this, there is also an aspect of learning. And I think you have a really interesting perspective on this because you actually sit on the board of the University of Wollongong, just outside of Sydney. So I'm really interested in how you're seeing universities evolve for the age of AI.
Yeah, so I remember, Cam, I was sitting in the board meeting when the first LLM kind of came into the world, and there were genuine questions being asked, like when AI first came out, can we turn it off? And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, the genie's out of the bottle here, Christina. We can't turn this thing off, but just in a short amount of time, that sentiment has changed, Cam, so dramatically from this kind of initial fear around AI to AI is now the biggest accelerator we have ever seen in education. Some of the things I'm actually seeing in universities, I think what AI is doing around immersive realities is just so interesting. So I was recently speaking to a professor and he teaches his students both in medicine and psychology where they're actually creating VR avatars to sit in front of a patient to actually practice diagnosing patients through, practice conversations. Even in the business school, they're doing it with business students, sitting them in front of an AR avatar and practicing really kind of high stakes negotiations.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Very cool, isn't it? So getting that practice in where you wouldn't have been able to do that before. I think the personalised learning for universities and education in general is picking up on when it comes to AI. I actually read the other day that 1 in 5 Gen Z and millennials listen to a podcast every day.
Well, they're listening to a great one right now, so they must be.
That's it. Well, so the reality is this is how, Cam, people are starting to consume information and they have a preference for that. So a lot of students now are taking syllabuses or PDFs or books and putting them into, a Google, it's NotebookLM. In a press of a button, Cam, boom, turning it into a podcast. The other final thing I would add actually is we're kind of moving from this idea of just open trained LLMs to actually guided learning. So instead of skipping the learning part, which I think was the biggest fear for universities and educators, that you'd kind of miss the learning part if you just ask the answer. So, what is photosynthesis? But now, guided AI learning platforms are actually saying, like, tell me what you think photosynthesis is. What are some of the components that you think plants need to grow? And it's like having that back and forth so you're not skipping the learning part.
Yeah, I've actually been really heartened by the adoption of AI in Australian education systems. I've seen quite a few states around Australia now embrace it into their classrooms and actually start creating their own models, their own tools that are working with students and delivering that learning experience. It's not just giving them the 800-word essay that they type a prompt in for. It's prompting them to come up with new ideas and investigate and explore the ideas. And it's really cool. You've actually spoken about this term called the art of the possible with AI. I'd love to know what you mean by that.
Yeah, when I talk about art of the possible, I think it's this idea that if you put the tech advancements aside for a second, what I'm seeing now in every single business, which wasn't like this even 2 years ago, it's almost like, Cam, everybody has been given this grown-up permission slip and handed to them saying, you can do something different. And I think it's unlocked imagination for a lot of people. And because before, some ideas were just too complex. They were too time consuming, or it was just impossible to execute, or we didn't even have the computing power to do it. So when I say art of the possible, I think that's what everybody feels like in businesses right now. Like finally they can come to their, leaders and say, imagine where we could go. And they're rewiring how they think about every part of their business.
Yeah, we've seen this over the last decade and beyond with Canva. Bringing visual design to people unlocks the art of the possible. Like I've seen finance teams get incredibly excited about putting together a new financial quarterly presentation deck or a strategy document in Canva because the visuals let them communicate so much better. And AI is this multiplier on that because it lets them spit out those docs and those decks in no time and do it with super high quality and make them extremely visual and communicate so much better to their audience.
That would have taken them months, oftentimes, preparing these financial documents sometimes. Completely agree.
What's one really wild or beautiful example of the art of the possible that you've seen recently?
I think there's a lot of really interesting frontier research happening in creative simulation. And have you heard of Genie 3?
No.
It's some new simulation research coming out of Google's Frontier DeepMind AI lab. And it's basically, Cam, you can build whole worlds from a text prompt that you can actually kind of go and walk around. And I think gaming is probably the most obvious one, but I'm seeing actually, it being used in architectural design. So imagine if you're an urban planner, you can say, here's my design. I want you to walk around the neighborhood and see how the traffic might flow. Or I was speaking to someone the other day, they were in kind of set and movie films, and they were saying, wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually, before we do these big stunts, wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually simulate what that environment would look like? And that's probably the same with like fire and rescue and people that do these rescue scenarios. Imagine if we could create a simulated environment where we could imagine where rivers might flow or where fires might go. So I think this creative simulation is a very interesting space and has so many applications in the creative space.
That is a super cool example, and my mind immediately jumps to the democratization possibilities of it. Because when you're talking about urban planning, sure, urban planners can use the tool to accelerate their work, but it also opens up new realms for everyday people who might want to imagine what their city looks like with bicycles as the only means of transportation, or 50% more trees on the streets. It would be super cool to see that.
Or even if you're a student and or a teacher and you want to do you want to take your creative writing to the next level. Imagine taking your students' creative writing and saying, let's actually take this, Willy Wonka idea that you have and create a simulation of it. And now you can actually, the words come off the page and you're actually walking around these creative rooms.
The power of visualization is something that we just learn again and again at Canva because it's our business. But like helping someone visualize something takes them to 80% of the effort. Like just getting it visualized and in front of people is half the job done when you're actually trying to achieve a goal. It's amazing. So I'm interested in how you're putting AI into practice in your own work. What are the tools you're using? What are the workflows that you use? How has it changed what you do day to day?
A couple of ways that I'm using AI in my everyday life. I now have an AI meeting note taker that comes to every one of my meetings. And I think it's so critical now because I'm actually spending much more time engaging with the person that's in front of me versus actually writing down every single word. So that meeting assistant joins every one of my meetings.
Is that just on video conferences or is that also in real life?
Oh, wouldn't that in real life? Oh, that would be really interesting. No, right now it's just on video conferencing.
There are devices you can get. They're like these little pendant things and they can basically hear when you switch them on and they can annotate your life.
Yeah. I think that brings up some very interesting conversations around trust, doesn't it?
It does.
But I think that's probably where we're headed. Even just having an assistant inside your inbox and saying, like, go through my last emails and tell me, how could I have written them better? So I think like having that assistant that's kind of constantly coaching you on how to write, I think is really quite interesting. So yeah, they're kind of two things that I use on the daily. I actually think if you really want to keep up with AI right now, it's not going to happen by osmosis, Cam. I think before we could probably say that technology just kind of came in and out of your life. But actually, I think if you really want to be a part of this next AI revolution and you want to genuinely change the way you work or your business works, you have to make a choice to get involved. Sometimes it's even that frustration point to say, like, is this absolutely the only way that I could be booking meetings with my colleagues that sit all across the world in 10 different time zones? Like, there has to be another way.
It is a real mindset shift of getting yourself out of doing those things that you just do automatically. Stopping, taking a breath for a moment and saying, do I have to actually do this? Or is there a better way? How would I use an
Absolutely.
AI tool to do this? Is probably the most important question you can ask right now.
Yeah, that's it.
You helped put AI in both Google Photos and in Google AI hardware. I would love you to talk us through how that happened and how it informed your philosophies around AI and creative technology.
I think building a career in a culture like Google that kind of doesn't hire for one narrow skill set because the business is just changing so quickly. I think that's part of the reason why I've got to lean into so many different interesting AI kind of projects well before it was cool. It's very, very common to inside organizations that value innovation and culture to be seen as a leader in one side of the business and then stretched into another part of the business. So in that environment, I became known as the person that you'd want on the team when there was no roadmap or we hadn't walked that road before, whether it was, meant bringing AI to businesses or putting AI in software or launching our hardware for the first time. So I think that cultural aspect of building your career in a space that lent into creativity is really key. And then I think, once I taught myself how to be an engineer and the technical skills, I knew I wanted to optimize for breadth and kind of understand the full product lifecycle from idea to build to sale to putting something in market. And I think that mindset feels really, really important today in AI because, Cam, I believe the future really belongs to high agency creative generalists and that kind of modern polymath. I think there's a lot of debate around this, but I think leaders who can, move between rooms, who can unblock teams, who can take a vague idea and turn it into real momentum, they're the people that can bring teams on a creative journey when the answer doesn't exist yet.
I always talk about the intersection being the spot where all the amazing stuff happens. Being a polymath, someone with really different skills, creative generalists, as you call them, is where you can make amazing things happen.
The very first AI-enabled product that I helped Google put into market, it was probably around 2017, 2018, where I was helping launch our hardware for the first time. And there was this late addition to the party, and it was this thing called Google Clips. The box said, "Look, no hands." And it was this kind of tiny little powered AI camera that you'd put on your shirt and it would capture meaningful moments. It was meant to kind of detect smiles in your kids or detect something funny that your pets were doing. And it was really great because it tested how people would react to having AI on board everyday objects for this first time. It probably only lasted about a year. But I think from that experience, I learned a couple of things about putting AI products in market. Number one, trust is everything. It was then, it is now, and it's still really difficult, I think, for AI to decide what moments are important to a user. You can't always just outsource everything. Secondly, novelty doesn't always equal adoption. It might for a little bit of time, but it probably won't stand always the test of time. Speed matters. The fastest you get a product into market and to the hands of the user, the faster that you learn and get that feedback. And then finally, AI products that last, I think, can't stand alone. They need to be embedded in your workflows. They need to be embedded in a tool, even just a daily ritual that can't be separate from what you do. It has to be, fully ingrained in your everyday.
From my own experience working on a Google product 15 years ago, Google Wave, which was a communication tool no one's ever heard of, I do really admire Google's ability to push out products, and if they don't work, say they don't work, and then take them back out of market. It really lets you innovate and find the next great product that people are going to want to use and that really resonates with people right now.
Yeah, that's right. Because whenever I sit in front of leaders, Cam, and they say, "Oh, we want to be more creative," and I say to them, where does risk-taking live inside your business? And they often look at me with a blank face and they say, "Well, we don't know." And I'm like, you can't be creative if you're not willing to experiment. That's the whole premise of creativity. It's naturally like a risk-taking kind of endeavor.
You do get to go out and talk to so many customers. And when you're out in the field talking to people, what are the top three, let's say, misunderstandings people have about AI?
I think number one, people think you can just kind of pick up an AI tool and just get it. I think anyone that's put an LLM box in front of their parents and said, go for your life, kind of knows this is not true. I think
ultimate user testing.
It's ultimate user testing. Put it in front of your parents. Well, that's it, right? It has to be simple. I think with apps and smartphones, we kind of learnt the swiping, the pinching, the tapping, the mental model, and we kind of caught up with that. I think generative AI, it's just evolving so fast, and users don't know the limits and they don't know the best way to use this AI technology. And I think that's partly why it hasn't reached its full potential. And I think the problem isn't about the power isn't there in the AI. I think sometimes the problem is the design problem. You have to actually help people to build these, I'm describing them kind of new mental models for how to actually use this AI technology that's constantly in motion. And I think that's a challenge, a real design challenge that we're only just really starting to solve. Second, another big misunderstanding people have is you can't prompt your way to success. I think a recent MIT study showed that 95% of Gen AI initiatives fail. I think it's because we've forgotten the really simple rules, Cam. You've built heaps of products before. You've got to get clear on the problem first. So instead of this vague, which a lot of people come to me and say, how can we use AI? A better question is, how can we use AI to reduce customer churn by 15%? So getting really clear around the metrics before just saying we need to use AI, because if you don't spend enough time upfront understanding the problem, I think you risk optimizing for the wrong problem.
So we talk a lot about creativity on this show, but creativity is quite hard to measure. So what's your personal take on how creativity can drive measurable impact for businesses right now?
The biggest mistake I think businesses make is thinking that creativity is always forward motion. It's not. It's messy. You can't put it in a spreadsheet. And I don't think a lot of businesses are actually prepared to stay in that uncomfortable window of not knowing. And I think to be creative in business, you need to define what's called the progress principle. Have you heard of the progress principle before?
No, tell me about it.
So Harvard Business School actually analysed around 12,000 diary entries from hundreds of employees on what made the single most important factor of what made them have a great day at work. And the number one factor was this feeling that you have, we all have it, where you've actually made progress on something meaningful.
Yeah.
So, if you run a business or lead a team and want the team to be more creative with technology, really the only way to do that and get measurable business impact, in my experience, is to redefine what progress means inside the business. It's about banking smaller wins. So you've tested a new piece of technology, you perhaps didn't like the result, counted it as a win. You got some feedback from the market, counted as a win. You killed an idea, counted as a win. I think we believe that, creativity has to be these, big monumental breakthroughs. It actually doesn't. Generally, it's a lot of small incremental learnings that you've experienced along the way that actually allows you to feel that progress principle in the confines of what businesses typically measure. I actually think it's just as important for businesses and founders to actually count the things that they chose not to work on. Because I think in AI, there is just so much that you could possibly do that I think sometimes it can be quite distracting. I think people undervalue that skill in prioritization, especially now when people are suffering from shiny object syndrome.
That's a really great tip. It actually reminds me of something that I started doing recently. So we've all got a to-do list, and inevitably at the end of the day, half your to-do list is probably unticked. Maybe you're a great to-do lister, but
I'm not.
I always get distracted. Meetings pop up. There's crises, things you just have to dive into. So at the end of the day, I've started having a prompt that just asks me, what did I actually do today? And I just spend 2 minutes going through my notes, seeing what I actually worked on, what conversations I needed to have, and then putting those down for the team to see. And it's really helpful for them to then see what I didn't work on, what was actually the highest priority for me. And then that helps us shape the rest of the week, the rest of the quarter, the rest of the year.
I think that's a great idea. You probably even take that further and you could train the model to say, what are the signals and what is the noise? Because I think that's the biggest challenge right now for leaders leading through this is so much of it is noise that it's really hard to get through the signal and being like, what do I actually when I look at all this amazing technology that's circling around me, what's for me and what's for the rest of the world?
When we're talking about AI and technology, it's all about machines and computers and the cloud. But really, I think the important thing about AI is how it helps us be more human. What is the most human moment you've seen emerge from an interaction with AI?
The Google and Canva team actually worked on a really interesting project where they got a traditional artist. His name was James Hancock, and he actually worked with it was a Leonardo team where they actually took a traditional drawing. So they got him to walk around Marrickville in the streets and actually feel and see and smell what the surroundings looks like. Then they worked together with AI to say, how can we take that traditional artist, hand-drawn work, feed that into AI and kind of together, what would the merging of those two capabilities look like? And then once they got the idea, they actually went to Marrickville and painted this huge mural on the side on this corner block. I think that's a really good example of humans and machines because, AI can't hold the brush, but it can help inspire the strokes.
That is a great quote there about holding the brush. You sit on the go-to-market board at Capital G, which is Google's venture arm, and that puts you at the bleeding edge of AI business. I'm really interested in what kind of startups you're seeing at the moment and what startups you think are the most undervalued right now in the AI space.
There is an exorbitant amount of VC money being invested into AI businesses at the moment. And I think there are a couple of questions still evolving, particularly like, is AI going to be a general purpose tool or is it going to be refined for specific tasks? And at least something that I'm seeing is that some of the really undervalued AI businesses, I think, are in the kind of unsexy sectors or maybe in perhaps a little bit boring businesses, but they are solving critical problems and typically quite niche, but really widespread, like AI for tax, Cam. Like imagine an AI that can analyze your receipts and
I can't
automatically...
believe you're saying tax is boring.
Oh, I know. Oh my goodness, I hope my accountant's not listening. Like imagine an AI that can analyze your receipts and automatically identify what's tax deductible. Amazing. Like in safety, there's this really big opportunity for AI to scan, hold up your phone and kind of scan physical environments with a camera, kind of instantly detect potential hazards that a human might miss. I think there's so much happening right now in even like clinical note-taking, so that ambient AI that sits behind a doctor's desk and actually collects patient notes so that, again, they don't have to sit behind the laptop and actually type out once the patient's gone. AI for tender writing, this is so big in so many businesses, especially in government. AI that kind of automatically drafts proposals for big tenders. There's so much that can be automated around that. And I think AI for security is also really interesting. One of the projects I worked on with Capital G is we invested in the first Aussie startup, two brothers from Adelaide, and they had a business that was around understanding human behaviour and kind of detecting when a document might be at risk of being leaked, kind of before it was shared. So I think there's lots to do around like human behaviour too, and kind of using AI to catch things before they happen. So again, I think some of these less sexy businesses that aren't always in the spotlight have so much to offer in terms of AI.
They are some super cool ideas. When you said tender writing, my mind immediately jumped to all the non-profits that I've worked with. And
perfect.
Their ability to get funding is often based on how many documents they can write and how well they can meet the criteria that a government department puts out. And
That's
AI
right.
being able to help with that means way more social impact, way more goodness
100%.
in the world, and it's a win-win.
Perfect. Yep, exactly.
You mentioned some good ideas. Are you seeing investors actually lean into that, or are they still kind of caught in the hype cycle and just going where the shiny stuff is?
Look, I think the story of the hour, it's that agentic AI story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's still, so many businesses are building businesses around enabling organizations to build AI kind of workflows, or even just having AI employees in their business. So like an agentic HR lead or an agentic marketing lead. So I think there's not only just building agents as employees, but also actually building the agentic platforms so that developers can actually build on top of that. I think there's still so much left to be built in democratizing just actually who can build with AI. So you look at the fastest growing startup right now, Cam, in the world. It's Lovable, because it's vibe coding, right? You can build an app and launch it almost instantly. I think there's so much more to come in that space. And I think probably because there's so much in the AI space around interacting with agents, I find the voice space quite interesting. So like generating audio. So maybe even taking this discussion and you could potentially kind of clone a section of your voice and then actually enable an agent to say, hey, let's use your voice to create some kind of user experience. So I think there's so many things that are still left to be uncovered.
So when we're talking about an agentic future, I think a large part of that is also around organizational transformation. What do organizations look like? How do they drive innovation? What are they going to be working on? So I'm interested in your approach to helping organizations, because you go into a fantastic number of them and you need to help them grapple with all these problems and move into the future. So how do you approach it?
I think the first thing I do when I meet any business that wants to do something fundamentally different with technology is I like to get them unblocked from the tools kind of mindset, because the tools are going to just keep changing. We have to get businesses to focus on what are the repeated problems that you have inside your business that you focus on every single day. So the things that you do over and over and over again. I think that is actually probably a better place to start. So instead of saying, let's use AI, I think the question becomes, how can we reduce our customer service team to spend 30% less time on support tickets? I think that's actually a much better way to start. So starting with where are the repeated decisions you'll find inside your business, and then getting really clear on the metrics associated with that.
We actually had a great talk from one of our systems engineers at Canva, and he was talking about automation, and he was like, he loves the conversations happening around AI at the moment, because it's getting people to think about those repeated processes they have, the problems that they just don't want to deal with every single day. And a lot of them don't actually even need AI to actually be figured out, but 100%. AI is getting people in that mindset of hunting for those problems and going, how do I get this off my plate, and what technology can I use to do it?
Yes, Cam. And it goes back to, the art of the possible. It's like I said, everyone's just all of a sudden been given this permission slip to think differently. So you're exactly right. Sometimes the answer is not AI, but it's the permission to think differently. Yeah. I think the next challenge though is, Cam, is businesses, like they have this huge list, like you said. And then the next question is, how on earth do we prioritize what we actually work on? I like to say part of that solution is you've got to price the problem. Every problem, in my mind and experience, has a price tag. Some cost money, some cost customers, some cost talent, some cost time. So the bigger the pain, the higher the priority. But there's a twist. Sometimes smaller problems create the biggest momentums if you solve them right. So if you've got lots of different things that you want to solve for, price the problem first, but then ask, will this thing that we work on actually create momentum? I think that's particularly important if you work in a large business, because sometimes it's not always solving the biggest problem. Sometimes it's solving something that is small and doable, but it's going to get people excited.
I love those principles. What methods could you use to kind of tease out the right questions and head in the right direction?
I think one of the best, most well-documented recipes for thinking creatively is one that I learned from our Google Moonshot Factory. So it's a 3-part recipe to help businesses think really big. So imagine 3 circles, Cam, coming together. So 1, 2, 3, and in the middle is the most creative problem you could solve. So in our Moonshot Factory, one of the circles is it needs to be a huge problem in the world. So is the problem worth solving? So will it affect millions of people? I think that's the key thing. And will it create change on a world scale? So, for example, Waymo was created to reduce millions of car accidents and caused by human error. So the idea is a big problem, and is it worth your time to solve?
Yep.
The next circle is a radical or kind of sci-fi sounding solution. So it's got to sound impossible today. So it's got to feel like it's science fiction. It's got to feel like a science fiction novel. So you're not aiming for kind of 10% improvement. You're aiming for a 10x improvement on what your team might be doing today. So again, this doesn't have to be like you're not solving self-driving cars, but if you're sitting with your team, it's like, is this radically different from what you're doing? It has to be radically different. And then finally, is some kind of breakthrough. That's the third circle. So is there some kind of breakthrough technology that's going to make this possible? So like our Moonshot factory will only pursue a problem if there's either kind of a nascent or breakthrough technology that could make that radical solution portable. So it's about seeing an emerging tech that's ready to be applied in a completely new way. So smack bang in the middle of that is the creative solution. So big problem, radical solution, breakthrough technology, focus in the middle.
That is a great framework that I think we can all use when we're tackling problems both big and small. Thank you for giving us that insight into one of the most innovative companies in the world and how it operates. I have just one kind of small but very big question to ask you, which is, what does AI look like? What does that look like in 3 years? Or if you can think far enough ahead, 10 years?
I think that's the magic question, isn't it, Cam? I think people keep comparing the AI boom to this next big wave since the internet, but I actually tend to disagree, Cam, because I think the internet, had limits. Intelligence has no limits. And with the internet, you could make some pretty good assumptions that everyone might have a website or they might be connected. And we can draw some parallels, but the reality is, Cam, we just simply don't know. We just don't know where this is all headed. And I think the future of where AI is going, it's not just technical, but it's also kind of quite philosophical and creative. But if I had to guess where we were going with AI in the next 5 to 10 years, I think we'll definitely be getting closer to a universal assistant. So everyone will have this thing that lives in our pocket that kind of manages your life, books your holidays.
Google Clip.
Ring. I don't know. I think it'll kind of just be more like sitting on your phone and just doing all the things.
Okay.
So I think definitely this universal assistant rings the restaurants, pays your bills. I heard Sergey, who's one of the co-founders of Google, say that he'd like to see Gemini create the next version of Gemini. So
that's a bit of a mind-blow moment.
Right. It's this self-healing entity. So I think that would be quite interesting. I think it'll be much more ambient, kind of in the background. I think it'll be kind of omnipresent. I think right now we actually open and close a lot of different apps and prompt a lot of different things. And sometimes it's a little bit clunky. I don't think it'll look like that in the next 5 to 10 years. If I also had to predict where else AI was going, I think it's just not enough to have a good product anymore, Cam. I just don't. I think
what do you mean?
I think with so much content kind of being developed by AI, and I think humans are emotional and we make decisions through feelings and we make decisions through trust and values that we share. So I think the ability for businesses to be able to connect with audience is going to be huge. And I think there's going to be another big explosion in the kind of creator economy, this kind of community building economy. I even think we'll see much more in-person IRL kind of events and things come back to life. Some people say, it's possible that we'll reach AGI in the next kind of 5 to 10 years. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I guess what we do know is that we're at the beginning of a journey and some of the most profound changes are yet to come.
Well, they are some great thought bubbles to implant in our listeners' brains, and I'm sure some of them are going to help build that future. So thank you for sparing them on. Let's change gears for a bit. All-star creative team. If you had to put together a team to tackle one of the biggest problems you can think of, who would you get on that? You get 4 seats. They can be dead or alive, any era, any universe. Who would you have?
I'd probably want some ideas people. So I'd probably a bit left of field, but I would want some kind of science fiction or creative writer, someone like someone like a J.K. Rowling or a Dr. Seuss, sitting next to I don't know, Demis, one of the DeepMind leads of DeepMind.
I
can you
imagine Dr. Seuss talking to Demis.
Can you imagine though? Because we are in a bit of sci-fi space. So I would have some kind of creative writer. I mean, I'd be pretty interesting to bring back Steve Jobs for the design aspect of things. Also because he could just make people believe in a vision that didn't even exist yet. I think I'd have someone do experiment, like an experimentation mind. So have you ever heard of Heston Blumenfield?
I have. He's an amazing chef.
Yes, he's an amazing chef. Again, kind of a little bit left field, but he's this relentless experimenter. And you'll go to his restaurants, you'll put on headphones and be listening to the ocean, kind of thinking you're eating a fish pie, and it'll be made of marshmallows and fairy floss. So I think what he would do is he would think what's beyond what's obvious and consider the full human sensory experience of the thing that you're creating.
I want to be in the brainstorm room with Heston because you'll be able to lick the wallpaper and taste Sunday roast.
Exactly, right? That's very Willy Wonka, isn't it? You need an engineer. If I could bring back anyone, I mean, you'd probably bring back Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, he was a polymath, a painter, sculptor, artist. But this is a pretty wild group, Cam. I think you'd need a great moderator.
Yeah.
So I would probably have someone like Simon Sinek. I think he'd be quite cool because he would focus the conversation around a why. Why are we building?
He would be amazing, yes.
Or like a Brene Brown that was where everybody's got to get vulnerable here. Yeah, something like that.
That is a crazy team. So what do we got? Dr. Seuss, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, and Simon Sinek / Brene Brown.
Yes. Yep. That's what I would say.
I definitely want to be in that room. I think we have Harriet on the line. She has been working frantically with AI and your amazing sketch that you did at the top of the show. And she should have some amazing results to show us. Harriet, are you there?
Hello, I am. And wow, that went really quickly. I have done a lot of different things. I don't know if will I be able to share my screen with you?
Yeah, share your screen. Show us what's going on.
So I just kind of did a whiteboard brain dump with some notes from your sketch there. So I started off with a super realistic view of in the banana fields and then inside a factory eating the pasta. And then I had already kind of looked at some, when you was talking about Willy Wonka, I went and looked at more kind of whimsical styles and what does a banana factory actually look like. So that was kind of helpful. And then I had this fun GPT already.
Love it.
Trained. So
I would buy a banana chandelier in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Let's start a business.
And then I've kind of evolved that. I kept moving onwards and created this kind of fun, whimsical family scene with eating pasta on banana boxes. And I've got some really strange animations that have even added dialogue. So I'll show you.
Oh my goodness.
You've gone all out, Harriet.
This pasta is amazing. Pass the Parmesan, please.
They're American.
Look, a flying banana.
It's very strange.
Is it taking you back, Natalie? Is it just like sitting on the farm?
Just like it. Yep.
I've got another.
Working on the banana farm has been quite an adventure, hasn't it? Especially during the harvest season. Remember that time a snake slithered out from a bunch of bananas?
We did have a snake that used to live in the top of the roof that was frightening a python snake.
That is
AI knows everything about it.
It does.
And then I have a realistic interpretation.
Oh, wow.
These ones are good. These ones are good, strong.
Yeah, nearly done.
Yeah, it's good to finally sit down.
You said it, mate. Long day.
Oh, my goodness.
Isn't that quite scary?
That is unbelievable.
I love seeing your process there, Harriet, from big mood boarding. It is exactly what Natalie talked about with design thinking and double diamond and going wide and then coming back into the perfect solution.
Love it.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for doing it. It looks great.
Audio listeners, you can click on the link in the show notes if you want to see all the amazing work that Harriet put together with Natalie's sketch and AI. All right, we've only got 60 seconds left, so let's close out the episode with our rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Natalie?
I'm ready. Let's do it. 60
All
seconds.
right, put it on the clock. Let's go.
Oh.
What's one prompt you overuse?
Edit this. My spelling is shocking.
First thing you built with AI?
In year 12, I did AI for my HSC and we had to build like an AI doorbell. So it was like Ring Central before Ring Central was a thing.
AI in high school, wow.
Yes, I know.
Favorite underrated AI tool?
NotebookLM, turning long papers into podcast research papers.
Good product placement. What's one job AI should never do?
Oh, I just became a mum and I don't want to put my son's face into one of those things that makes him grow up really, really quickly. I actually think some things are just better left a mystery.
They are.
Yeah.
You and AI are making an album. What's the genre?
It would have to be some kind of remix. I think my Spotify wrap-ups every year are just, there's such a mix of things. So it would be a remix.
Pick a movie to remake with AI.
I think if the AI could remake The Matrix, that would be an achievement.
That feels like meta inception. What's a creative project you've had in the back of your mind for ages that you want to jumpstart with AI?
I'm really fascinated with interior layouts and design. And I often think, wouldn't it be amazing if you could actually put the layout of a house into a design, AI design tool, and it could take thousands of other images of good flows of homes and it could say, maybe it needs a door here and maybe it needs a window there. So it'd be something like that. Or it would be AI for some kind of investing app for kids. So I have a 1-year-old and I get so much Disney stuff now instead of stuff, Disney stuff. Let's invest in like Disney.
Well, interior design and AI might be coming to a Canva near you soon. And finish this sentence. A surprising thing AI taught me about myself is...
to build my own internal intelligence system. I've recently become a new mum and I think being in this kind of information overload and AI age, it's kind of really easy to default to searching for answers outside yourself. And I think for the big decisions, sometimes the answer is actually right in front of you. You just need to trust yourself to be able to see them.
Well, firstly, congratulations on being a new mum, and I totally feel you on that. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Prompted, a podcast about AI, people, and the creative spark. You were just listening to fascinating insights from Natalie Piucco, the APAC Customer CTO in Applied AI at Google. Thank you, Natalie. That was an amazing conversation. I loved how it went from Willy Wonka to agents and everything in between.
Thank you for having me, Cam. It's been a blast.
To keep up with future episodes, please subscribe wherever you love to listen to podcasts or head on over to YouTube. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a rating or a review. We always love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep fanning that creative spark.